Hey, welcome back! I'm already angry. Every time I record these videos on a camera and not just a voiceover, something always goes wrong. Either the color starts fluctuating, or the video goes in and out of focus, or the HDR blows the hell out of the video, or something. And then I go and fix it and run a few test runs, and it's working perfectly, and then I record for real, and it messes up again, and then I go fix it in post, but I overcompensate without realizing, so I go from like a sickly green and yellow to like a genie from Aladdin blue, and I don't even realize until I look back a month later and I'm like, what the hell was I doing? This is ridiculous. This is a bit of a weird energy to start a video with, huh? I'm recording this a little over a week before Xbox and Bethesda are set to share their big yearly game showcase, so this might be a bit of a bold time to make this claim, but I'm a bit bummed about how Xbox's 2022 is shaped out, and I wanted to talk about it. There's a good chance that we see a lot of cool stuff coming out of that showcase, and some of it will be slated for 2022, but I don't see a lot of big show-stopping, big deal games coming out in the next 6 months, and if you're watching this after the showcase, feel free to tell me how much that prediction aged like milk in the comments. I'll take the hit. If Xbox shows us some surprise bangers actually releasing in 2022, I will gladly eat my words. I could have very easily released this video after that showcase to make sure it was still relevant, but I think a part of me wants to embarrass myself. Like the rest of you, I'm sure I will be watching that showcase and I'll be pretty excited by what they announce, but I feel like Xbox has had a serious wait for it problem for years now. While Game Pass has been gaining a lot of traction and has been their golden goose for the last few years, which we'll get to near the end, I feel like since 2018 we've been saying that Xbox is primed to finally step back up to Sony and Nintendo's level when it comes to software, and it still hasn't happened. Acquisition after acquisition, game announcement after game announcement, and while it used to seem like that next step was just around the corner, now it feels like that corner is just an infinite loop, and every time it feels like you're finally actually turning it, it gets moved further back like some kind of sick optical illusion. Let's look at Xbox's 2018 E3 conference. This contained a whole lot of exciting announcements for third-party games, most of which turned out solid to great, but the exclusives were more of a mixed bag. Lower profile titles comparatively in Ori 2, Tunic, and Sea of Thieves came out to notable success, but the bigger titles had a rougher fate. Gears 5 came and went, Fallout 76 was a notable disaster, and while Bethesda wasn't exclusive to them at the time, it is the last project to come out of their now exclusive studio, and Crackdown 3 had built up a lot of hype just to fall flat on its face on release. Then came the acquisitions. Compulsion Games still hasn't revealed their follow-up to 2016's poorly received We Happy Few, and while it could show up in next week's showcase, that's 4 years they've had this studio and all we have is a rumor. Undead Labs revealed State of Decay 3 in 2020, but according to reports at the time of the announcement, they didn't even really know what the game was yet. Ninja Theory released a mediocre multiplayer project and have revealed Hellblade 2 with no release date as of yet, though we can probably assume 2023. The Initiative's Perfect Dark is reportedly in development hell, and Playground is the only studio out of the bunch who's done anything substantial for them thus far. And to cap off that showcase was the reveal of Halo Infinite, which we will get to in a second here. If you keep scrubbing through these Xbox conferences, you'll start to notice a very similar pattern start to pop up. 2019, lots more great third-party titles, a banger exclusive in Flight Simulator, a few overlapping titles from last year, and then the absolute duds that wound up being Crossfire X and Bleeding Edge. Obsidian was acquired in the meantime, and they have dropped Grounded, which is fairly niche, but their more anticipated title, Avowed, has gone radio silent for a while, and while they're also working on The Outer Worlds 2 and another secret project, these are all more games that have yet to actually hit the market and make the splash that they're expected to. Double Fine's acquisition was also announced in that 2019 conference, but they've yet to release anything exclusive for Microsoft because they've just been working on Psychonauts 2 this whole time, and that's actually on PlayStation. 2020 had Forza Motorsport, but they also showed off the aforementioned Disappearing Acts in Avowed and State of Decay 3, as well as another one, Everwild, Fable, which is still far off, The Gunk, which wasn't amazingly received, and Stalker 2, which we'll also discuss soon. That was also the year that they pushed the Medium really hard, which just ended up being okay. And that leads us to 2021, which showed off a lot of stuff that is also still awaiting release, among which was Redfall, Starfield, Stalker 2, and Replaced, all of which are no longer launching in their original windows of this year. They also announced in the last few years their acquisitions of Activision Blizzard and Bethesda, two massive deals with huge ramifications that, just like the previous acquisitions, have yet to bear any fruit just yet. Which is totally fair because they're pretty new, but it does add to the pile of coming soon this all winds up creating. I'm not gonna act like Xbox has been putting out pure garbage since 2018. There has been some good stuff, but a lot of the higher profile titles have been falling flat, and there feels like there's this perpetual sense of the storm coming the next year and the next year, and it just never arrives. 2022 felt like such a home run for them because not only were some games that were announced years back slated for release in this year, but some games were announced last year with such gusto that you really felt like they would hit their timelines. Not to mention that maybe Avowed or Everwild would finally break their silence and show up here even though they didn't actually get dates by the end of 2021. It was unlikely, but it could have happened, and instead, 2022 feels like it's fallen into a pattern that's all too familiar now. It all kind of started with Halo Infinite. After not launching with the console and receiving a delay of a full year, Halo Infinite finally came out with a month and a half left in 2021 and stuck the landing. People saw this as a return to form and a sign that things were still looking up for the franchise. I went on record saying that I didn't like the campaign very much, but I was in the minority and I was okay with that. I was glad that people who had loved Halo their whole life were loving this game, and I had a good time with the multiplayer myself for a few days. It reveled in that success for just a couple of weeks though, because not long before the calendar turned to the new year, people started to question the amount of content in the multiplayer modes and the battle pass progression, which compounded off the disappointment of the lack of Forge and co-op at launch to create a really toxic environment around the game. That toxicity absolutely went too far and I don't condone it whatsoever, but speaking on just the game itself, it was missing a lot of content that you'd expect, and with a stream of slow updates in 2022, even a lot of people who celebrated Infinite's launch and claimed 343 had finally cracked how to make a Halo game were once again considering whether the franchise should be taken out of their hands. Halo took yet another big blow with the release of its TV series, which fans pushed back against pretty hard. I haven't seen it, so I don't know how good it is, but one quick look at the online discourse and the review scores tells you just how much of a bad taste this left in fans' mouths. Maybe the biggest blow to Xbox fans this year though was that last month both Redfall and Starfield were delayed to early 2023, and both of these delays surprised me. Not because I don't expect delays, I absolutely do. If you trust any date that hasn't already passed, you don't know anything about the modern video games industry. But Redfall was only announced last year, so you'd assume that they waited that long to get a better gauge on when it would come out, and worst comes to worst, it gets moved to later in 2022, not early 2023. And Starfield had the perfect date and came from a company that has become infamous for releasing unfinished titles, so I thought Todd Howard would rather die than change this release date. Even if all this game was by then was the cinematic teaser that they showed off. Like, the entire Bethesda team could have literally not started on the game, made this teaser as a concept pitch, slipped into a coma, and awoke on November 10th, 2022, and I still would have expected this game to release the next day, which makes me super worried for what its state is right now. I think the higher-ups of Bethesda or Microsoft are aware that people's patience has run thin on the whole janky Bethesda release thing, so maybe this delay is actually for polishing the game properly so it defies people's expectations in that department. But at the same time, I feel like the only way that you change it from the 11/11/22 release date, which was exactly 11 years after the 11/11/11 Skyrim release date, an exact date that they gave a full year and a half prior, by the way, which is unheard of, is if this game is literally the most unplayable, unfocused mess ever created. In my head, this game either comes out early 2023 and is way more polished than anything that Bethesda has ever put out, or it comes out late 23, early 24, and goes full cyberpunk on us. There's nothing in between, I truly believe that. And if that wasn't enough, multiple studios with affiliations to Xbox have been directly affected by the war in Ukraine, and I want to make it perfectly clear that above all else, all that matters is that these people and their families stay safe. Video game release dates do not matter at that point, so I don't want it to seem like I'm sitting here going, stupid war, now I have to wait a couple extra months to play Stalker 2. Like, it truly does not matter. But it is worth bringing up in this video just because it does add to certain games being pushed into next year. Atomic Hearts developer Mundfish has relocated from Russia, and both GSC Game World and Sad Cat Studios, who are helming Stalker 2 and Replaced respectively, have moved from Ukraine. I'm really glad the teams were able to relocate. I hope they're all safe, and I hope that they haven't taken any extra pressure on themselves to be able to meet the deadlines that they set. Sad Cat Studios has come out and expressly delayed Replaced to 2023, which makes sense. They were talking about a late 2022 release date earlier on, so with the relocation, it's natural for it to slip into next year, but we haven't gotten official word on Stalker 2 and Atomic Heart. The latter isn't an Xbox exclusive, but it does come out day and date on Game Pass and has a cult following, which made it a nice little addition to the service. And just the other day, we heard that it might be getting pushed into next year because they stopped work for a while due to the conflict. Mundfish quickly responded saying that work had never stopped on the game, which implies the delay rumors are false, but given that they announced a late 2022 release date back in February, whether through normal or extreme circumstances like this one, it's not hard to imagine the game getting pushed. Meanwhile, Heart of Chernobyl was delayed back in January to December of this year and was then given an update that it would be delayed indefinitely due to the war. Given all this information, Xbox is left with exciting indie games like Tunic, Scorn, and Somerville, as well as Ark 2 to show for 2022. A far cry from what the year was shaping out to be, and one that could get even worse if Ark, which has no confirmed release date or actual gameplay as of now, also receives a delay or, you know, it sucks. sucks. Like, I know you got Vin Diesel in here for God knows why, but it's not like the first game blew people away, you know? It's really sad to see the string of bad breaks and poor planning that left this year feeling so empty for Xbox because I was so excited for so much of what was coming. I know I'm not the only one who feels this weird 5-year tease of the revamping of Xbox exclusives to feel a little bit strained, and I wonder what effect it'll have on Game Pass, which is doing amazing right now, but I feel like this Twitter exchange sums up my worries perfectly. This is a solid little clapback from the Game Pass Twitter account, but while I personally have zero problems with the selection that Game Pass offers, I love the amount of indies, AA games, and old titles that I never got around to that are on there. Seriously, it's an incredible service. I am a hardcore fan of games, and Game Pass is currently appealing to a hardcore audience. It had huge growth a year back, but it fell short of its projections this past year despite great marketing and exciting additions, and I think part of that is because Game Pass is failing to capture the casual player. Big companies, and especially big streaming services, live off of that audience because it's always going to be bigger than the hardcore one, but you can't appeal to them with an amazing selection of hidden gems and games that are a few years old. There are a lot of Xbox fans who are only going to play Redfall and Starfield from this year, and despite that, if you do the math, they still would have benefited from buying Game Pass, especially if they played another couple of smaller games on the service on top of that. But now, both of those are gone, and these people are not going to be convinced by the likes of Tunic or Loot River, so you've lost the interest of those players this year through that lack of well-known, well-received software. If Arc 2 gets pushed like I think it might, that means potentially a full year and a half between major first-party exclusives. The partnership with EA Play and the acquisition of Activision will certainly help in this department because you get the FIFA and COD heads all in one, which is a big market, but if you want them to buy this service instead of just those individual games, you need to supplement it with a bit more. It's not that I'm worried about Xbox's future, I'm sure they'll be fine, and you could say, hey, a lot of this stuff got moved to 2023, so I guess that's their year, but we were so certain about that in 2021, and 2020, and 2019, and so on. Games can flop or come out buggy, delays can rear their ugly heads again, and all of a sudden, 2024 is Xbox's year. Like I said, I am gonna watch this showcase, and I'm probably gonna be really excited by a lot of stuff there, but I've started to notice that year in and year out, I'm way more satisfied and happy with Xbox's showcases than I am with their actual outputs. And for the highlight of every single year to be what's coming out next year feels like a trend that needs to stop before it starts feeling like false promises. What do you guys think? Are you seeing a similar wait for it vibe coming out of Xbox? Are you bummed about it? Do you actually like their output in recent years? I'd like to hear that argument because I do think they have been putting out some decently good stuff. Leave your thoughts in the comments. If you're new here, subscribe. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace.